bitch like you late for class. I got no problem with your man, I just came to dance. If I grab on your hips, don't fear the grasp. Itty bitty bitch with the thickest ass, thick titty chick with a table ass. Hands on your knees and show some class, yeah. Why she looking at me though? Watch me get the pussy for free though. Step it up, take a shot like a free throw. Her girl on the side wanna see more. We don't tape shit, but we record. Give her 1 round, she want 3 more. I don't apologize, just for remorse. Romanticize about the intercourse. Why she looking at me though? Watch me get the pussy for free though. Step it up, take a shot like a free throw. Her girl on the side wanna see more. We don't tape shit, but we record. Build up pressure to the big score. Put my money to her mouth, can she fit more? Problem with her nigga, he a big door. When she felt it in her hip, she made her reach for it. I ain't mad, little mama, muy bonito. Hablo Spaniel, mo poquito. Dance with me, let me feel on your tempo. Do it real fast, while she look at me though. Watch me get the pussy for free though. Step it up, take a shot like a free throw. Her girl on the side wanna see more. We don't tape shit, but we record. Give her 1 round, she want 3 more. I don't apologize for remorse. Romanticize about the intercourse. Bounce up and down with me. Bounce up and down with me. Shake it fast, stepping down, little bitch, like you late for class. I got no problem with your man. Yeah. Bow your head if you feeling this. I bet you feel it in your wrist. I got many things, none came from a wish, yeah. She shook the tambourine and did me like a fish. I got blessings on blessings, nigga. Treasures on treasure, nigga. Several, nigga. I never tested, nigga. What I'm supposed to do? Keep this here from you. I got too many people trying to tell me what to do. We got too many people taking blows in the stew. I seen too many people walk around in the zoo like they don't know what to do. Wishing they was on the tube. I hear homie said, what up, dawg? What up, dawg? He said he heard that new hit, it was up, pop. These rappers skimming, they spit dumb talk. I got better things to do than to bump, y'all. We want that crucial with that bump, dawg. Had my trunk knocking bricks off the block, knock so hard they arrest me for a gun charge. I'm like, what car? You ain't getting far. You see, it's not my job to make you wanna do your thing, and it's not my job to make an actor do a scene. No Vaseline, singers they don't sing. You see they hungry, girls will pop it on IG. I'm on top when I see me, we got a problem, you and me. Everything I do potentially is on the beat, yeah. Royalty, lay down at my feet. Woe is me, you niggas think that you MCs. You got people standing in the crowd looking at TV. I raised her heart rate just by seeing me. She said she want me, B-A-M-N-E. Girl, if you want me, make me something to eat, yeah. Bow your head if you feeling this. I bet you feel it in your wrist. I got many things, none came from a wish. She shook the tambourine and did me like a fish. I got
What's going on? It's your boy, DameSmiff, and we're here with another episode of Musician Talks, where we're going to be discussing a lot of how, let's say, repeat offenders and petty criminals and the low lives of society have been skirting by in society, right? And the reason we're going to look at that is because it has really shaped a bit of how we generally view crime and criminality here, especially in America. And so with that being understood, I kind of drew that logic and made a comparison to how we view criminality when it comes to, let's say, music consumption and the selling of music and the creation of music, and all three, right? Because when I think of something like a petty crime, right, it may not be petty in your eyes, but like something like scamming, like if you're scamming, hundreds or thousands of dollars from people's bank accounts or cash apps and things like that, right? In most people's eyes, that's like, a victimless crime in a way. Like no one physically was hurt, even though, there is like a whole value to why somebody would commit a crime to that, right? Then you have things about like coercion, like having people scammed in a way that they believe that they're receiving a product that isn't really what you claim it to be. And so when I think of these things, a lot of times when I have examples within the music industry, These are things that are kind of like directly in front of the mainstream public's face. And one of the examples would be something like, let's say you want to listen to your favorite rock group's album today, right? How would you do that, right? And in general, most people would think about like opening an app on their phone, right? Well, when you open an app on your phone, you have to have access to the phone. The phone has to have access to the internet. And getting to those two barriers is already what you have to do before you even get access to the album. Just with this option that you presented, right? You could easily go to a store and buy a CD or whatever, right? Just walk down the street with cash and do that. But where would you play it, right? So for many people, especially today, generally music is more so a utility bill. And that utility bill is usually a subscription that you pay to get access to the music you enjoy. So if the music you enjoy is on Apple Music or Spotify shelf or something like that, 9 times out of 10, you're paying for a phone with a phone bill, and then you're paying for access to get that music through a subscription service. And with that, you would then be able to enjoy your music. Now, the reason that's important to understand, because on the other side of that, creating music, if I wanted you to listen to my new album, as you know, the funky little rock band that I am, how could I get this album into your hands? So in the reverse, I would have to pretty much get access to the internet, get access to the resources and services that would represent my music, like a distribution company, royalty representation like ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC and things like that, so I can properly do business in order to get my music onto the shelves that you want to get your subscription from, right? So what I'm laying out here is a business model that generally is agreed upon, right, amongst fans and musicians and record labels and, you know, the music industry and scene alike, right? But the issue that most people are going to run into is the bad actors in a way. Bad actors are the ones that essentially try to leverage the system in a way that benefits them without either having to put as much effort in as everybody else, or to where they don't have to put in any effort at all. So that'll be how we define that, at least in this context, right? It'll be people who kind of want to just break the rules, not necessarily follow the rules, or follow the rules in terms of becoming a winner. Like following the rules is a loophole for them, right? It's just part of the game to play. It's not necessarily a guardrail for them, right? So we're not going to be talking about like basic playlists or standard plugins. We're going to be talking about standards, accountability, and a massive blind spot that could be draining your pockets, whether it's being a fan or even a creator of music, right? And so before I even get into this, I will give you a solution to all of this, right? One big solution I can give you is that direct to consumer is probably the most, I guess you can say, beneficial model for a writer right now, even if you are signed or whatever it is. So what that means is if you are creating an album, if you can get all your legal stuff situated, your copyrights, and make sure you're represented and stuff like that, if you can sell directly to the fan and you don't have to go through Apple Music, or you don't have to go through any record store or anything like that, then you will get pretty much the most leverage as far as creating a good, healthy relationship with your fans, right? In the reverse, as a fan, you can have the same. You can have more of a conversation about, it's not really a conversation, but I guess you can say influence on the pricing of an album or the taste of an album and things like that, instead of having that middleman in between you and the artist that will then feed both of you basically funneled information that doesn't have everything that you want to know about the fan or what you want to know as a fan about the artist, right? That kind of information is going to be important because let's say if you know your favorite artist is not logging into, social media to post every single day. But suddenly a message pops up promoting an album or something like that. That tells you that you can go get an album or prepare for an album. But 9 times out of 10, in order for that to work on a mainstream, big level, you're going to have like so many trigger points before we announce that an album's coming out that an artist today that doesn't necessarily post on social media all the time won't be noticed as much, right? It's just quality over quantity conversation, right? All over again. So what some artists have figured out, and we'll call these the quote unquote bad actors, because we'll say bad actors because they are trying to do a good thing in some instances, but in one way, if you have bad intentions, this is very easy of an option for you to choose. But because some artists have understood that if I'm online way more than the rest of the people in my market, and online could be putting out more music, or that could literally just be online, like just being live streaming like this, but just talking, constantly reviewing topics, constantly playing music, constantly busking or things like that. In their mind, they believe that that's going to create more opportunity, or I guess you can say real estate, for the attention available for the audience, right? That means every time you log into TikTok, you'll see me. Every time you get onto YouTube, you'll see me, and all that stuff, right? It's kind of like the basis of the numbers logic behind sales, right? The more people you talk to, the higher chances you have of making the sale, right? So now the issue is, as a fan, how do you know that the person you're seeing every day is working harder or is just annoying, right? Or is just there every day, right? So once you figure that out, then you'll figure out where you want to place your money. But now, after that point, once you place your money, that is when you'll realize whether you like the music, or if they're quote unquote good, or if they're going to compete with the attention of everybody else, and if you'll come back. At this point in the conversation, this is where a lot of artists are going to have to figure out, what do fans want and how to consistently give it to them in terms of building an actual business out of it, right? So this is where you get genres and approaches to music. Like you'll see some artists, they'll lean into a style, or maybe they'll lean into a sound or something like that, right? And that's how they'll be able to be recognized and create a bit of a brand for themselves. Now, here is where the basis of this video is pretty much going to start. Now that you understand what it is to kind of be an artist and generally compete with each other, and the kinds of artists you could be competing with in terms of quality, quantity, whether you have a direct to consumer type of model, or if you're one of the people that can compete on the shelves of all the other artists like Drake and Taylor Swift, right? Now that you understand that, there's going to come to a point to where the numbers have to make sense, right? It won't even matter which one of the two paths you pick if, let's say, your fans don't want to buy albums. So if your fans are the type of fans that prefer to stream, then it's going to be very hard to do direct to consumer because of the accessibility of having Apple Music right on their phones, right? So unless you have your own app and are playing the game right alongside Spotify, Apple, and Tidal, 9 times out of 10, your fans aren't going to make that easier for you. So you're going to have to either fight harder, which means playing the game, or make playing the game seem like way more fun to do it your way than it is to follow what everybody else is doing. So for you as an artist, you're gonna have to figure that part out. Then on the other side, as a fan, perhaps you do want that authentic, real kind of immersive experience with an artist. Can you truly get that just paying $12.99 a month on Apple Music? So then that would mean the cost for you as a fan to truly get that is going to be different. You're going to have to pay for concert tickets, which means you're going to have to pay for travel, which means you're going to have to pay for everything that comes with trying to experience your favorite artist. And so in your brain, you may be thinking, well, if I pay $12.99 a month, that's enough. And then in someone else's brain, they may be thinking, I need to see this artist. I really believe in what they're doing, right? Two totally different people, but they still are in quote unquote practicing listening and supporting an artist that they enjoy. So now With this video, we're going to try to highlight how everyday citizens watching the legal system hand out leniency to repeat offenders, letting people cycle right back into the communities to victimize others while the public lives in fear, right? And the way we'll draw a parallel to that in the music industry is that there's a lot of times where we'll enjoy something that is really, really good to us. Like, we really like it. Maybe we like how it sounds, how it made us feel that one time, or that memory it brings us. But overall, it doesn't truly support the music industry in the way that you think it does. Like, it doesn't necessarily bring investments back to the artist. Maybe it does to the record label or the overarching whoever's owned the rights to the catalog. But in general, a lot of people, when I have conversations with them, believe that because they have your song in the playlist, or they bought a hoodie, or they were there in high school when the song was a hit, they are supporting you or are a fan of your music. And I think defining that with a little bit more, I guess you can say, specificity, right, will make this easier for people to understand how they can support their artists better. It won't necessarily ostracize people in terms of saying I'm not or I am a fan. It'll just say, okay, if I want to be a fan, this is what I want it to look like. And you can actually shape that if you understand how generally it works, right? And so for me, I was able to figure that out when I looked at trying to actually make money in the music industry. Seemed a lot like trying to make money as a politician, or as, let's say, a parent, or trying to make money as a CEO. Because if you try to think of making money as a musician as a general employee or a worker, then you'll find yourself falling victim to needing to work harder, or I guess you can say, in a way, trading your time for money instead of trading your skills for the value of your skills, getting paid for the value of your skills, right? And it's something that I had to figure out quickly, that I noticed in many artists, because if they didn't figure that out, they would be saying yes to situations like contracts or gigs, or even playing styles of music that they didn't really enjoy. But in the other hand, I had to figure that out quickly because of the amount of work it takes to actually be successful in that path of, more resistance, which would be doing direct to consumer, which would be making your own brand independently and still trying to compete with a Drake or whoever else is at the top of the list today, a BTS and all that stuff, right? So with that being understood for many artists, I think what the shift was in a lot of their heads at the same time was that they're going to have to learn how to focus on people that actually invest into their music. So the general population of people that listen to music, if you just get in the car and turn on the radio and you just say, okay, what is hot today? Like, you're just bopping along to whatever the radio plays. They're not investing in that as much as the person who was, super thrilled about your next album drop or your next merch drop and stuff like that. And that's where I think we can take a huge lesson from BTS and K-pop, even Punjabi rap and things like that, as we were exploring that in the past weeks, because the cultural aspect of why they're supporting their artists really does drive a lot of the financial part of it as well. Whereas in my country, if you were to take a rock band right now, if you don't know the band or know someone in the band or know of the band because of word of mouth, 9 times out of 10, you're not looking for the band, right? There's no reason for you to be, pushed towards that unless they can manufacture some kind of draw. And so, like I said, once artists started to figure that out, they kind of started to create I guess you can say, a fork in the road of, okay, now that I know that I need to figure out my niche fan base, I'm going to hone in on them and then figure out what it is that they like and then make my skills super valuable to those people. Or they wanted to get everyone and they did whatever it was to get a reaction from everybody else. So after that ended and you've done all the reactions to get everybody's attention, or you try to get a niche fan base, the fans would then in return tell the artists how valuable they truly were, right? And so I've seen this in two instances. If you watched Kendrick Lamar come from Section 80 all the way to where he is now, you can see how the fan base of hip hop and rap really kind of carried that torch, right? But then if you look at, let's say, a Tekashi 6ix9ine, and you take his story from beginning to end, you'll see how hip hop didn't carry that through, but there was a lot of attention on this person who was making music at the time, right? So whether you want to say you were listening to them because of their musical rapping talent, like they could really make music that kind of blew your mind when you were listening to it, or whether you heard their name because of the quantity of times their names were submitted into the algorithm. However it was, it goes to show you what the fans were willing to value, right? So in return, there's way more people who are regarding Kendrick for his musical talent than they are people regarding Tekashi 6ix9ine for his musical talent. Now, the two names, though very popular in terms of like notoriety, you should at least generally understand the existence of the two names, right? If not deep dive into their music. But it proves that there's actually some kind of reward to not being as musically inclined to the audience, right? And this part is where where artists are usually frustrated. So for the people who can play instruments and they can write songs really well, or maybe they're poets and things like that, and they can understand music theory in a deep way, when they listened to Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly, they were super excited to hear Terrace Martin and Kamasi Washington and, people, all kinds of musical talent sitting on these albums and playing and deconstructing the samples and understanding the poetry and the layers and things like that. But then on the other hand, when you look at a Tekashi 6ix9ine, it wasn't so much about the musicality, the beats, and who's making the instrumentations and what kind of musicians are involved. It was more so the story behind a lot of the songs, right? The antics and things that were going on behind the scenes within the studio or outside the studio that had very little to do with music, that attracted a lot of attention to people. And if it was a vehicle for them, they used music as a way to push more and more of the brand, right? So now that we understand that, the part that frustrates artists is that what we're usually told, and this is how we'll start to get into the parallel of being a criminal and judges releasing repeat offenders. What we are told as artists, usually, and I mean this from the typical church musician, student musician, to my grandpa told me how to play guitar or trumpet or whatever like that, all the way over to the rapper who wanted to rap to get out the hood, or the person who joined a girl group because she needed a way out, and college wasn't her way. From all of these different walks of life that push people into music, the consistent thing that we were all taught was that you need to be professional in all aspects, right? Whether that's punctuality and, culture and things like that. But you also need to be authentic, okay? Authenticity was one of the things that they pretty much taught every single musician, whether you were learning from a little lady how to play piano in church, or, you had like a super mean director like the movie Whiplash. They wanted you to be authentically you, right? And so what we're starting to realize as musicians is that the person that truly makes you who you are may not be as quote unquote valuable to the industry as we thought it would be. And so when artists make that discovery, they usually make a pivot. And the pivot is usually either going out of music like a Tekashi 6ix9ine, or diving deeper like you will see with like a Frank Cole, a Problem, the rapper Problem, or a Tyler Creator and stuff like that, right? So when you see these different pivots, you'll see who's reaping the rewards. But like I said, again, we'll have to take that repeated cycle of then responding back to the artist by telling them what it is that we like. So If a Tyler the Creator drops a new album and we don't like it for whatever reason, then we'll have to say that, and then he can make a decision. If a random, TikToker kid goes viral because they did something crazy while, I don't know, they got like a DUI or something while driving or something, and we start going through their catalog and streaming the music to figure out who they are, in a way, they are still rewarded for that, right? And so for many artists that are now learning the music industry, the standard that was set for them is kind of up in the air. They don't know if it's, man, should I really double down on musicianship like, let's say, a Tyler the Creator did, or should I really just, quote unquote, be authentically me, which may not be a musical person, which may not be a professional person, which may not be a, I guess you can say, consistent person in terms of being in the music industry and competing with everybody else, right? And so now you're having to figure out, well, how do I actually navigate that in the world? And the examples we have are typically rare, right? There's very rare you'll see an artist that can be themselves authentically and then be rewarded for it. And the way we can understand that to be true is usually through third-party investments or angel investments, or they get signed, right? There's some kind of backing behind the artist that allows them to be themselves creatively, because that backing is the foundation that applies the business knowledge that maybe their team has or maybe they themselves have, so that way they can create consistently but still make money doing it. So the best example I have in my brain for that would be like a Tech Nine. If you look at a Tech Nine on paper, it looks crazy. Like all of the imagery and the branding looks crazy. But then if you look at the business underneath all of that, then it looks pristine like a Navy ship. Okay. So being able to understand that is going to be key, but it only really works because you know the game you're playing, right? So some of us have dreams of being, as cool and big as Tech Nine. But if you have a situation where people aren't necessarily on the same page as you, like I said, being authentically themselves, they aren't the type of person to get up in the morning and actually like help the business for the business's sake. They're getting up and doing whatever it is they want to do. Sometimes the hindrance is right there, and you have to set a standard. And so sometimes the standard is deviating away, like a Tyler the Creator, where you might as well have to focus on the ones that actually appreciate and want to work with you to get the job done, and then everybody else can get the crumbs. Or you'll have to try and get everybody to like you, which would mean the people who want you to prove to them that you're a dope artist, right? And that means like the people who are in their Spotify playlist is just, the people they enjoy, right? They're not trying to see what's your new song coming out, and they're not trying to see what they can do to make it better for you to get into their playlist. They're waiting for you to prove to them why you're better than Nelly, why you're better than that one song they heard in school, or when they were sad and their boyfriend broke up with them. This song, you got to be better than that song to get onto their playlist, right? So there are artists that have to make that choice, and they'll tend to just do antics usually, which work sometimes, where a trending new R&B song happens because, it's trendy and it's hot, but it found a way to compete with the other R&B songs in your albums, right? So we're running pretty much like a broken playbook here in the music industry, and a lot of it comes down to figuring out this phenomenon of, okay, we like what we like as fans, but we want to be inundated with consistency by musicians. But at the same time, while we want the consistency from our musicians, the way we consume music comes at such an easy way. Creating consistent music has gotten harder. So we have to solve for all of this, right? And so the reason this relates to repeat offenders is that artists have found a new benefit to being more consistent than being highly skilled musicians, because as fans who are being charged $12.99 a month, you prefer consistency, right? You'd rather open up Spotify and see new music every day, if not every other day, than having access to the music. It's gotten to that point now. And When we know that as artists, we're just going to try and feed you more and more music, whether it's AI slop and all these things like that. So what are you really paying for with your $12.99, right? And I mean that from the perspective of an artist, but as a person who's actually a subscriber to a music platform like an Apple Music or Spotify or something like that, it really does beg the question of what I'm actually paying for, right? Because I'm not going in there searching for music, and I could sit there and let it tell me what's interesting. But at the same time, I do have the music that I like, and I can only listen to so much music within a certain amount of days, right? So if I were to pay the same amount of money consistently for years and years and years on end, the value that they're getting from me is just going up and up and up and up and up and up, which means the cost is going up and up and up and up for me. And the access to music isn't going anywhere, but it's also what I'm willing to allow, right? So outside of that, I'm adding into a pool of money. These $12.99 a month that everybody pays goes into a big old pool, and artists are able to draw from that pool, whether it's like royalties and things like that. And the amount of artists that realize, well, I can tap into that pool if I can just quickly answer for that consistency problem that most fans have with AI, or the ability to bot and, fake streams and things like that. So what does that mean for what it is that I think I'm paying for, right? If I'm paying $12.99 to listen to music I like, but it's really funding a platform that's going to be housing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of songs that I do not want to listen to, will not try to listen to, and possibly don't think or will believe is real music anymore, what am I actually paying for? Because in a lot of your brains as fans, you will believe that you are listening to someone stream on Apple Music and you're supporting them directly, which in a way you are. But how are you doing it in comparison to what could actually be directly beneficial to the artist, like going to their website and buying an album, or actually, joining their mailing list or something like that? However it could work for them. I don't know how it could work, right? So if we start at the root of the problem, like how the justice system handles, let's say, rehabilitation, right? It's going to be a way for us to understand the cost of it, right? What is the thinking behind the cost of participating in this process, right? So in a way, look at the prison system, I guess you can say, as the Apple Musics, right? Apple Music is the prison system. The prisoners are the songs, right? The prisoners are the ones that are going into the prisons, and they have to actually stay there, right? And it's going to cost you as citizens to pay for the building to keep them in there, right? And the cost of that are actually staggering. So it's like $445 billion annually into policing, courts, corrections, detention, with state corrections eating up over $115 billion of that, right? And so if you hear that, you're like, wow, that's crazy. And you're wondering, like, well, where does that money come from, right? How does that money flow? Well, it starts with your income, property, and sales tax pulled straight from your working citizens, like all of the numbers that you see in your paycheck that come out, right? It also flows from state and federal treasuries into administrative overhead and detention infrastructure. So that can be like private prisons all the way up to like, the federally funded prisons and things like that. And so it feeds a revolving door where the median state cost to house one prisoner sits around $61,000 a year and balloons to over $127,000 in states like California. Now, why do you think, and let me know in the chat, why do you think it can be from a range of $61,000 a year to almost double? Now, I can think of a few reasons off the top of my head, but I'll be objective and say maybe it could be like the standards of the citizens when they think of prison experiences, right? So if you go to prison, is it more of we just need you to sit in a box and just eat, enough calories to not die? Or is it where we want you to be rehabilitated and reacclimated back into society as a person we deem fit for society, right? So that could mean that if you're like a super, super, super violent person that is in jail for like punching somebody in the face or something at random, you could be let out as early as under 10 years, because the idea is that, well, you have not punched anybody in 10 years. You should not be likely to punch people. And we have trained you and taught you and groomed you to not punch people anymore. Perhaps we should give you another chance, right? And so what this then can do is that if a person is of this nature, they could, in theory, take advantage of this, right? And then have a record of punching the person once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, and on and on and on and on, if they understand the game that they're playing, right? And then in another hand, you have a person who they get caught once, right? Maybe it's like a very nasty assault, or maybe it's like one big fraud case, or maybe it's like a crazy, scandal with a lot of notoriety, and they get hit with the maximum or close to the maximum of the charges that they can get, right? And in one hand, you can think, well, how are they supposed to rehabilitate and get back into society? And then in another hand, there's a large group of people who feel like that's the sacrifice you take for breaking the rules of society. You just lose access to being a citizen, basically, right? For whatever reason, they want to land on. So when we think of this, I usually compare this to like if we found out somebody, like if we found out, just to throw a name out there, if we found out Snoop Dogg was botting streams like the minute we all discovered what streams were, what would be the punishment? Should it be punitive? Should it be rehabilitative? I don't even know if that's a word. Should it be a thing where we're like, oh no, please don't do that anymore? Or should it be a thing where like, you knew better, you shouldn't do that, you have now lost access to, let's say, the ability to make a living as a musician, right? And I don't wish that upon nobody, but it does beg the question of like, what should be the quote unquote punishment for taking advantage of a system like the Pro-Rata pool with the streaming and the botting and things like that? Is it just a financial thing? And I want to know in the comments how you guys feel about that, right? And like I said, it comes from me looking at how I used to hear about gangster rappers talk about football numbers. They used to be like, yo, my cousin was out there stealing and then shooting people, and he punched this one girl and he got football numbers. And everybody used to be like, oh man, that's crazy. The judges are giving out football numbers. And in my mind, I was like, well, I don't ever plan on doing no stuff like that. So it seems like that's something easy to avoid, right? Then later the conversation turned into, well, let's not give people football numbers. Let's move towards rehabilitation, right? And rehabilitation, the idea was that like, if somebody is selling drugs because of, let's say, circumstantial environmental reasons, right? Let's say that, right? When that happens, we want to be able to punish them for saying, hey, this is bad, you shouldn't be doing this illegal thing, but then basically point to all the options they have that should be better for them, and then get them back into society so that way they don't have to choose that anymore, right? So if you're a gangbanger and you out there killing people, we take your gun away, we, wean you off of all the drugs and stuff you're on, and then we're supposed to basically teach you how to work and be yourself and be back in society, so that way you can say, okay, I want to be this kind of person, right? Fast forward to where we are today, what we're seeing is that a lot of people are choosing differently, right? So it's not so much that you can generally rehabilitate somebody. Like, it is common practice for like maybe a teenager to not know that he can fist fight people he has an argument with, right? It is common to know that maybe some people have anger issues, or maybe they're going through like panic episodes and stuff like that. But then you have people who are more like lifestyle criminals. Like, it's more like your grandparents have been doing this type of stuff. Your auntie is also a shoplifter. You and your dad are criminals. Shout out Pooh Shiesty. So it's more of a thing where you're not really confused about your decisions. It's a very clear, you have clairvoyance on what is supposed to happen here. The issue is that what should the cost be for you living this way, right? So for example, as a musician, if you wanted to be a trumpet player or a person who wants to, let's say, play in an orchestra or in a marching band or something like that, you got to pay for the instrument. If it's a city or community wide band, and you got to pay for membership or something like that. If you're going to school, you got to pay for tuition to get into the school. If you want to, buy your own instrument, like I said, you got to pay your own instrument. If you want to rent it, you got to rent it, and that's going to cost, right? We kind of understand what comes with the cost to do the thing, right? But then when we think about something like, what if you wanted to steal beats? What if you wanted to steal beats from people's hard drives? Like right now, this is a thing. Like somebody right now is logging into some website to figure out how to steal beats off of someone's, thing. Like we seen with Ariana Grande, they were saying people were leaking music from people that she was working with devices and things like that. So if you have a lifestyle where you're doing that, what is the cost of doing that? And let's say if you get caught doing it, what do we do with you now that we have you and caught red-handed? What do we do with you, right? And so what I think is happening, that traditional punitive models boast that 62% of people released are rearrested within 3 years, with nearly 39% ending right back inside. So structured vocational programs like Michigan's vocational village drop recidivism down to nearly 12%. So there is proof in that rehabilitation works, right? So for all the people who think if you do the crime, you do the time, there is an argument right here that a 12% drop, even though it sounds like a small number, it's actually a pretty big amount of progress for people who are trying to stay out of prison, right? Because like I said, I think in a previous stream, I don't know which one it was, but I was saying that most people who are committing crimes are doing it out of like desperation, or they're just like literally like not thinking clearly. Like many people aren't like planning a heist when they go and rob a 7-Eleven. Most of them are just thinking like, man, I just want to get in here and just, doing some stupid stuff, right? So when you're navigating that, you got to know that in real time, you could be talking to somebody who may be thinking like this, who may be, functioning with a certain lifestyle, right? But what is the cost? What's the cost of, being with them, functioning with them, or having to be a victim of one of them, right? So when a system refuses to be proactive, the everyday taxpayer foots the bill for the chaos while living in the active apprehension, right? So that means like as you go to the gas station, you sitting there filling up your car, you think you're safe because you paid your taxes, right? But if Mr. Repeat Offender comes over and hijacks your car and drives off, the cost of all of that you paid for, because you paid for his rehabilitation for him to get out, you paid for possibly the, I guess you can say, cost of your car being stolen, because unless you got like insurance where it's like, oh no, your car's stolen, everything's free, like I don't know, but usually you're gonna have to pay for the cost of your car and then whatever came with the inconveniences of having your car stolen, right? So many of the people, when they see that, they think that they're kind of separated from that, and compare that to the music industry, that would be like when you hear us artists say we're getting paid a fraction of a penny, and then you go, damn, that's crazy, I pay $12.99 a month for Apple Music. There's a disconnect right there, right? So now let's bridge that over to the music industry, in that if you think taxpayers funding a revolving door justice system is frustrating, let's look at this pro-rata streaming pool. You pay a flat monthly subscription fee around, I'll say like $10 to $12, depending on whichever one you have, right? And that'll be to like Spotify or Apple Music, right? That money doesn't go directly to artists you actually listen to. It gets dumped into one massive centralized pool called the Pro-Rata pool. That pool gets distributed based purely on global market share. So if you have the bigger share, you get the bigger amount. Like, you get the most money for the most amount of work, capitalism, right? If a massive major label juggernaut or viral novelty track, like a TikTok single, like if some girl just starts doing the little, jingle bops, and then, you guys start spamming it because, I don't know, her shirt is pink, then it'll pull in billions of streams. And actually TikToks count. So that's why you've seen a lot of female artists doing like the, we just gonna dance on TikTok thing, because it actually did count when you guys tuned in to watch that stuff. that scoops up a lion's share of your subscription money, right? So even if you never even clicked play, like I said, if you're not even out there looking for music, like I said, I don't even do that. Like I have music I just like, and then when the artist I think I'm supporting drops something new, I just continue listening to that, right? Because I'm not of the person who's sitting down there for hours trying to see what Latin hip hop is dropping every day because there's so much music, right? So I really, in my mind, would prefer to pay for the music I have once and done and then just keep that. You remember CDs and cassettes and stuff like that, right? So instead of paying monthly for access to the music, that's where I would prefer to have it, right? But I want you to see the direct parallel here. So because the mindset is identical, let's compare the repeat criminal offender to the AI slop creator and the jock shock marketer in today's music industry. Relying on, I guess you can say, systemic loopholes, minimal personal accountability, and reactive legal framework that waits for disaster to strike is a thing that most repeat offenders are doing, right? They take from community, give nothing back, and exhaust public resources. That's generally how most people view them. So now when you think about the AI slop music creator, the person who's doing 50 Cent in Spanish or something like that, they rely on algorithmic loopholes, clickbait gimmicks, like seeing a cool picture or something like that, 50 Cent in a sombrero going da 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 and something like that. Outrage marketing, a lot of the AI slops you see coming out today too is rage baity. Like they want you to see like a black girl in a cotton field and a white dude going like this, yelling in the thumbnail. So then when you click it, it's like an R&B song about like how she's in the South and sad, and it's rage baity because it's supposed to trigger you. It's supposed to trigger your curiosity or your your negative thoughts and things like that. And of course, it's just low effort stuff like the lo-fi beats that you see a lot of people making, or the ability to just take like random 4 or 5 chords and a key signature and then put drums underneath it. It's very easy to do. I can do that with my own body. So imagine doing that with a computer with the ability to just pump out prompts left and right, right? So they don't study harmony, they don't practice an instrument or anything like that, and they don't respect the culture. So they flood the DSPs, and the DSPs are digital service providers like the Spotify's and CD Babies and TuneCores and all them stuff like that. They actually flood them with junk and drain the financial pool away from artists. And we talked about this, I think, like 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago now. And so this shortcut here is something that if we just keep rewarding, which is what I mean by like repeat offenders, they just keep doing it over and over and over again, then the pool for people to be able to make music and understand, I guess you can say, the true value of being talented in music is going to be the I guess greater hurdle for many artists, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to react to a lot of, just a few, not a lot actually, some videos on how this line of thinking actually functions in real time, and then again draw the parallels as well to the music industry. So we're going to actually look at an actual sheriff explain to us how he has to deal with repeat offenders. So for those of you who don't know, that when you commit a crime, the police put you in jail and the judge has to give you your sentencing. What typically occurs is that the judge has to go through the laws and understand the severity of the crime to see how heavy of a sentencing you get, right? And your lawyer is supposed to interpret that law and help you kind of like, navigate, okay, this is what you can argue for, this is and all this stuff, right? To get the judge to say, okay, seeing what you've presented here, this is what you're sentenced to, blah, 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 right? The sheriff is claiming that when they are apprehending criminals, the criminals are being let loose either on a lenient sentencing or in a way to where they're spotting the criminals over and over and over again. And so they're asking for a bit of change in terms of how either people vote or actually think about the laws that they're breaking.
This is Sheriff Ozzie Knezowich with the Spokane County Sheriff's Office. For many years now, people have asked me pretty much one question. How do people get out of jail so quickly? You arrest them and they're right back out on the streets. My PIO comes to me all the time with questions from the citizens that come through our Facebook accounts or other emails asking how can such an individual that committed this level of crime be released without any bond? Well, that answer is fairly simple. It comes from the court rule itself. Court rule 3.2. Not to have to read all of it, but basically 3.2 says that you will be released without any bond unless you have committed a capital offense or a series of other questions are answered, as in you're likely not to show up, as in appear if you're released, if you are likely to threaten somebody, if you're likely to go out and commit a crime of violence. But here's the kicker. The definition of crime of violence isn't necessarily what you might think it is. Because under our pretrial tool that we use to determine who gets released, the threat to kill, domestic violence, isn't considered a violent act.
Okay, so how many of you agree with that? Let me know in the comments if you agree with that. If somebody threatens to kill you, do you think that's an act of violence, or do you think that's just words, right? Now, I can understand how both sides could be true, right? I can understand how somebody could say these literally are just words versus I'm going to take that threat seriously, right? The problem that I'm noticing here is that there seems to be a lack of understanding of exploitation when it either comes to lawmaking, or there's either an understanding of it and an awareness of it, but it's just what comes with creating laws, I guess. When we seen I don't know if it was in California, but this whole thing about like if you steal under $500 or $1,000, you're not going to get charged or chased or something like that thing. It seemed like a terrible idea the very millisecond I heard the sentence finish. But it begged the question, at least in my head, as to who would want a law like that? Who would want to, vote for that? Who wants to take advantage of that? And I can only think of two kinds of people. Somebody who thinks people who steal need grace, and also somebody who likes to steal. Because if I wanted to steal, then this sounds amazing, right? But if I knew somebody who, let's say, was an actual kleptomaniac and was suffering from something like that, I would generally want rehabilitation. I wouldn't want them to just be in jail for like thousands of years, right? But like I said, what if you're not a kleptomaniac in the sense of you have a disorder and, something's wrong with you? You have a lifestyle of stealing. You're just the kind of person that takes. So when we consider that, how do you then make a law that can cover all the bases, or at least layer the law to do that? And this is what got me starting to think about, well, if I'm a musician and I get caught botting, or let's say making AI music for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 albums or something like that, what would be the thing to get me to think about making real music and, actually getting involved in the process of being an actual musician? Similar to a person who, if they weren't stealing, would have to go to work, get the money, and then pay for the product and the taxes that come with buying the product. You know what I'm saying?
Now, let that sink in just a minute. The threat to kill is not a violent act. I would disagree with that, especially when it comes down to domestic violence, since domestic violence tends to be one of the leading causes of homicide in Spokane County. But according to the rules, the court rules, there's where we're at. So people often will look at law enforcement and say, but you guys just let them out. No. A little bit of civics here. We arrest people. We take them to jail. They go in front of a judge, and the judges determine if they stay in jail, if they are released on their own recognizance, or if they receive bond. That is the court's duties.
So when we think about that process, right, as he has explained it, is this something that you think should change, or do you think this is kind of fair, right? And I'm only posing the question because I would sit up here blue in the face arguing to get paid more as a musician. But if you're not willing to go out and buy an album, there's really no way I can get the money from you, right? There's no way I can argue that I should be making a cajillion dollars a year because I'm that good on the piano if you don't even want to buy music. So what he's kind of showing here is that if the judges have this kind of, I guess you can say, it's either guardrails or interpretation of the law to where a threat to kill isn't really a violent act. Maybe you'll see some people who get like assault cases and they'll only get like 4, 5, 6 years. You'll see some people who do drug trafficking, but then they'll get like 50. Somebody will do fraud and they'll get like 300. You'll see somebody get life for one murder where a gang member might get, 8, 15, 12 years for 4 murders. So it's like the variety of ways that people will be experiencing this system, I think, is going to come from how we would generally have common sense about this, not necessarily the technicalities of it. But I could be wrong because I'm not a lawyer. So lawyers probably have a completely different understanding of this. Judges clearly have a different understanding of this. I mean, I don't know.
I can tell you that the Spokane County Sheriff's Office and the Spokane Police Department do a really good job taking the criminal element off your streets. But that's where it ends. And it is so bad now. The push to keep the jail empty as much as possible to reduce that population has created policies that, ladies and gentlemen, are frankly killing citizens out on the street. And I'm not saying that lightly. Here in the next few weeks, we will sit down and I will give you case and point as to why I say that. And it's to the point where the courts have actually given the jail the ability to release on recognizance. The jail staff, they don't even have to go in front of the judges at that point. The courts have given them that. And there are a few cases that I'll highlight here of people that either were released on their own recognizance or had a bond and went back and committed more felony acts. One individual was arrested by SPD in January of 2020 for unlawful possession of a firearm, which means he's a felon in possession of a firearm. You know, I hear politicians scream about gun violence all the time. But we do nothing to end gun violence. If you've committed a crime with a gun, you should go to prison and it should be mandatory. If you are a felon captured in possession of a firearm, that should be mandatory prison sentences also. But it's not. They release these people. Our governor released multiple people who had been arrested for possession of firearms due to COVID. This individual was arrested by the Spokane County, let me rephrase that, was arrested by Spokane Police Department again on 6/3 of 2020, and he was in possession of a AR-style firearm. Now, mind you, he was out on bond at that point. He was out on $4,000 bond. And he was rearrested in possession of another firearm while he was out. He was also arrested at that point for controlled substance with possession with intent to deal. So you have a situation where our Safe Streets Task Force arrested this individual while he's out on bond, minimum bond, $4,000, which means he had to come up with $400 to get out. He's rearrested and the courts gave him a $10,000 bond, which means he has to have $1,000 to get out. And we wonder why we have a crime problem. We wonder why we have a gun violence problem.
Okay. So I wanted to hear the whole context of that story. So essentially, do you guys think in the comments that we're dealing with in this story a lifestyle criminal or somebody that needs rehabilitation? Because what this is leading me to believe is that there probably has to be some kind of hybrid in terms of knowing when to be punitive and when to be rehabilitative. Because rehabilitative. Because the idea that the guy was a felon with a gun and then was caught again with a gun with drugs, trying to sell the drugs, makes me think that he wants the gun. Like, it's not a thing that we're like, unless he lives in an area where people are hunting him, like people claim in the rap songs, like, oh, I gotta keep my gun on me, it's scary. Then that's fine. You're an American citizen, right? That's cool. But it does beg the question as to, like, okay, if you know you have to live a certain way with the gun, then what are those things and how can we make sure you're not getting arrested and stuff like that, right? That's where it begs the question of, like, is this person just doing this on purpose? Are you just a lifestyle criminal and stuff like that? So, like, if you've seen, like, an artist and they told you, I don't write my song lyrics or something like that, is that a standard for you? Like, would you be like, oh man, you don't write your song lyrics? That's crazy. Or would you be cool with that? Because I bet you 9 times out of 10, the person he's talking about here has people around him that knows he has a weapon, but also knows he's on probation at the same time. So I don't understand, like, how we would generally let that slide if I was the judge, unless I believe that he needed rehabilitation, right? So what we need to really focus on with these conversations is our understanding what is a problem that needs fixing and what is a problem that needs punishment, right?
So we have another individual who was arrested on October of 2019. And at that time, he was arrested for possession of controlled substance. He bonded out. And he was rearrested on 3/18/20 and ordered by the court for burglary, second degree, commercial, possession of a stolen vehicle, criminal conspiracy, controlled substance delivery, manufacturing, possession, theft second from a building, and this individual was released on his own recognizance. And he has a history of being a violent criminal and is also known to be armed. When we went after this individual to arrest him, they actually used a SWAT team because he was so dangerous. I can go through many, many more.
So, like he said, there's many, many cases, and this is just Spokane County. So now imagine other, states, other cities, other counties and stuff like that. But I just want you to compare it to those people that we're talking about would be the AI slop people, right? In the music conversation. And then you'd have yourself. You're the person that gets up in the morning and goes to work and you pay taxes to make sure this AI slop guy has basically the resources to get arrested with that SWAT team that he was talking about, the boots and the shields and the guns and the visors and the Velcro and their uniforms and stuff like that. Like, y'all pay for that stuff, right? And so they use that money to get them that stuff to go get this guy, and then the judge lets him out again. So as the citizens, y'all would be like, oh man, that's crazy, I'm upset. But we have to figure out, are we doing this because we want to rehabilitate the guy that needs a SWAT team when he gets arrested, or are we trying to actually punish people who think it's okay to be as dangerous enough to where we need a SWAT team to come get you, right? Now, we can argue about like how police, but again, I don't plan on having to deal with a SWAT team no time soon, so I don't know how you get into that position. But for those of you who want to be dealing with the SWAT team, we got to really think about what that looks like, right? Like, so if you want to make AI music and you want to make 50 Cent speak Spanish and do remixes, you got to know what that looks like and be smart about how it's actually going to, benefit you. So let's get into this from the music side of things and actually understand a bit more on how the quote unquote problem will look when we're dealing with it in a different instance.
Now to dive deeper into this topic, Jillian Snyder, former NYPD officer and criminal justice lecturer at John Jay College. Jillian, thank you so much for being with us. Reports show Kelly had prior arrests for attempted murder, for aggravated assault, for reckless endangerment. What more can be done to try and stop repeat offenders?
So all those things were the things that this apparent guy had been arrested for or charged with before he wound up going on like a shooting. So let's hear it one more time.
NYPD officer and criminal justice lecturer at John Jay College. Jillian, thank you so much for being with us. Reports show Kelly had prior arrests for attempted murder, for aggravated assault, for reckless endangerment. What more can be done to try and stop repeat offenders?
Well, thank you for having me. And it's important to remember that he previously pled guilty to lesser sentences. And I think that's something that deserves some attention. We are blaming this criminal justice system entirely for letting people out early. But honestly, we have such an overburdened system that we are forced almost, prosecutorial services are so strained that we're letting people out way prematurely.
Well, and so let's piggyback off that, because we also know that Kelly served only 11 months of a 3-year prison sentence. We heard officials there say had he served that full term, he would not have even physically been able to commit these crimes. Why is it that he only served 11 months? And do you think something needs to be done to change this system?
Well, his original charges would have actually brought on a higher penalty or higher sentence. So because he pled down to a lesser sentence, that's why he was given 3 years.
Okay. So they said because he pled down to a lesser sentence, that's why he was only given 3 years out of 11, I think she said. So do you think he said that because he was intending to be rehabilitated? Or do you think he said that because he knew the offer that was on the table? So think about what we're really looking at here, right? We're not looking at somebody who may or may not know what they're doing, and that being the problem. We're looking at somebody who's trying to figure out how to navigate what to do with this kind of person, which means they have to identify this kind of person, right? So that means that we can't place upon him that, yes, he wants rehabilitation. We have to prove it. We can't say, yes, he deserves to just be punished without any form of rehabilitation. We have to prove it, right? So how much proof do you need, right? And for you, I want you to think about for yourself. Like, if you think about some of the charges that they were saying he had, think about for yourself, if you had them charges, how much proof do you think you would need to prove to at least everybody else to say that, no, I'm a good person now. Don't put me in jail forever. I'm okay. I won't do this again. Like, so what we may be looking at, and at least what they're alluding to, is that he took advantage of our empathy and sensibilities in terms of thinking that he wanted rehabilitation, right? And so what this looks like to me is the equivalent of people who say, who basically are saying that they want to be in the music industry, but they don't want to put in the work to either be independently skilled or have some kind of leverage within the music industry. Like they just want the fame, essentially. And that'll come with the gimmicks, the notoriety, and all that other weird stuff that you see people do. But then when it's time to actually be musicians, it doesn't work. How many of you have seen the Ray J and Orlando Brown fight? Why are they boxing, right? So when you see things like this, it begs the question as to why they're being rewarded. Why were they paid for that? Why did you guys watch that? Why did you guys ask for that? Why did anyone think it was a great idea? Right? And so when you start to get to the core of that, you got to then look at yourselves as fans and say, damn, I really supported something that is X, Y, and Z, right? And I don't know if that's the same case for, let's say, the judges in some of these court cases where they go, wow, I was supportive of X, Y, Z. I don't know if it works the same way for them.
And again, every state varies in terms of early release, incentivized good behavior, probation or parole. And in this case, again, not knowing if this incarcerative system was so overwhelmed with people that they didn't have enough room for him, and that he may have had good behavior, and that's why he was released early. Again, speculating, but we have so many people in such an overcrowded system that oftentimes we are forced to release people early.
Well, and Jillian, something we certainly don't need to speculate on. We know that Kelly live streamed this as it was happening. Do you feel that social media companies, bear responsibility here? In this situation, it is Facebook specifically, but we know there's so many platforms on which a person is able to live stream. Is there anything that can even be done about this?
Well, law enforcement work really well with all social media. I know I did it when I was a police officer with the NYPD. If we had a threat, anything that we were concerned about, we would reach out to them, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, all of them. And usually they were very resourceful in giving us the information we needed, providing there was criminality afoot. Again, we have to just be cognizant of the fact that they service people, and people want to go on this platform and they want to have free speech and free rights to do as they will. But these social media platforms are very, very good about reporting any issues that they may see, any threats that may be coming about. They do, I know firsthand, we would have Facebook. Back in the day, we had MySpace, and they would actually report to NYPD when they had any kind of threat that may have, caused public harm.
So it begs the question as to what should be done punitively or for rehabilitative statements for, I guess you can say, people that want to offend the music industry, right? And I don't mean that in some like, get the AI, slap people out here. I mean that in the sense of like, all right, if somebody gets caught botting or stealing streams or something like that, how much of an offense do we really think that is, right? And for most of us, like I said, our connection to the music industry is a $12.99 monthly subscription. It ain't really like you feel like the concert tickets you're getting are pricing you out. You guys haven't felt that yet. You kind of you've relegated yourself to just YouTube videos and YouTube music, so it's not really a big issue for you. So let's actually take a look at what it means to actually bot and stream and what comes of that.
On January 23rd of 2020, a tweet went live from a user named Carlemagne who said, French Montana's out here buying streams in a desperate attempt to turn his 3-month-old flop song into a hit. This was in reference to his song Writing on the Wall featuring Cardi B and Post Malone, which had been released about 3 months prior. The song charted when it first came out for 5 weeks, and then fell out of the top 200 on Spotify. Then it eventually re-entered the Spotify charts and also reached a new peak. But what was odd about this is that despite it hitting number 27 on the Spotify charts, it was way down at 1,192 on the Apple Music charts. Then Carlemagne searched the song on Twitter and saw a bunch of people on Twitter saying that their Spotify was hacked and was playing French Montana's song Writing on the Wall. The tweets about the hacks were all posted between the 18th and the 25th of December, and the song charted again on the 22nd. So it was basically confirmed that French Montana was faking his streams.
Okay, so French Montana, a dude dating a really famous girl right now. He grew up, or came up, I guess you can say, selling DVDs and movies and stuff like that in New York. He was the DVD guy, right? And now he's like the prince of whatever. In my opinion, and I hate to say it this way, but in my opinion, that tracks. That makes sense. The guy that would sell someone else's movies on the streets, though it is a hustler's mentality, would definitely bot his music. He definitely would bot his music. That tracks 100%. Now, I know a lot of you don't like to think that hustlers have some kind of like sleaziness to them, but yeah, that's a big part of it, is that they'll take opportunities that come to them or that they'll make and things like that, regardless of the cost, right? Being a noble hustler is being a legit businessman. That's what that is. But if you're the person who's making a living in a 20-something-year-old dude or a 30-something-year-old dude selling other people's content, I can definitely see you botting your own content. I can definitely see you doing that.
It isn't like he's some random artist. He's a Grammy-nominated artist with tons of huge songs, who was also signed to Epic Records, which is a division of Sony, one of the big 3 record labels. And while French Montana was one of the few that got caught, there are many other artists in the music industry faking their streams, followers, likes, and so much more. A lot of fans online have been realizing what's going on, with tweets about Atlantic Records faking views and comments on videos from artists like Lil Uzi Vert, Roddy Ricch, A Boogie with a Hoodie, and Don Toliver.
So remember, a lot of the culture that's around musicians today, I wouldn't say musicians, really it's hip hop, but a lot of the musicians, I'll say in America mainly, there is this like, you gotta be tough, you gotta do something that makes you legit or make you cool, right? And it's very rare you'll ever see somebody stand on something that's music related, right? It's usually something that's a lifestyle, like maybe you're into cars or girls or partying or something like that, drugs or guns or something like that. And then you'll see people getting into things like their identity, right? Who they are. That really drives it home, right? Very rarely will it be the skill set that they have. We've lost that at the end of the 90s, basically. But keep that in mind when we're looking at who we're talking about here. And the reason I pointed out French Montana and the DVD thing was because it shows the characteristics of how you view yourself when you look at how you start, right? So if some of these people are going to start off selling drugs, then that means you were essentially just taking advantage of an opportunity laid in front of you. The type of opportunity laid in front of you was that of which you looked at and said yes to. So just keep that in mind.
Clearly, this is a common occurrence in the music industry, and many artists other than the ones I listed are doing it. So join me today as we look into fake streams, the biggest scam in the music industry. In January of this year, France's National Music Association, or however the hell you pronounce this, did a study that found that about 1 to 3% of streams in the country were fraudulent. The streaming service Deezer said that about 7% of the streams on their platform are also fake. A company named BeatDap that makes software to detect fake streams for streaming services thinks that about 10% of all global streams are fraudulent. Even last year, the German Music Industry Association said they are focused on curbing streaming manipulation and streaming fraud, emphasizing the fact that they are a central concern for the music industry. The estimated amount of money stolen from artists by these fake streams is just mind-blowing, and I'm going to touch more on that later.
So why do you think he called it stealing? Because I pointed out, I think weeks ago, about how TikTokers and the trending sounds and things like that, there's a lot of people who screen record or even audio record things and then like layer the music on top of other songs and things like that, make DJ mixes, and you guys will eat it up. You'll get, hundreds of thousands of views on it, but you don't view it as stealing. But let me know, why do you think he calls it stealing? And do you think it's stealing?
We know these huge statistics of people faking their streams, but who are the people that are actually doing it? Well, in the study done in France, they found the genre that had the most fraudulent streams was rap, which is understandable as it is the most popular genre in France and in many other countries as well. But given the previous estimates of up to 10% of all streams being faked, it's very likely that a lot of other genres also suffer from fake streams.
So the reason I think it's mostly rap is because rap is viewed at as a lower art form for music, because for some reason people think it's easy to rap. It's not easy to rap, which goes to prove you why there's so much faking in rap. It's not easy to rap. Many other countries try to emulate American hip hop, whether it's how we look, talk, and approach the music creation process. But the thing that they're struggling with is what I talked about, I think I want to say last Friday maybe, is that they struggle with authenticity. No, it was when we talked about Sidhu Muswala and Tupac. It was authenticity. If you take the American hip hop culture and then interject it into your own culture, you're really not bringing anything that you really represent, right? So then on the other hand, if you take the criminal side of culture or criminal culture and then inject it into your own culture, well, you're not really going to get any good things out of that either. So you have to figure out what cultures actually coincide with each other, right? Music and dance, those go together. Music and food, those go together. Music and film, those go together. But if you're going to be a person to think that you can be a thief in the general sense of a thief, meaning like if you want to take something that someone else created and then sell it to get profit from it, and you won't split the profits with the person that created it, that's thievery. If you're willing to do that in any sense of the form and you think it's okay, I could see how that could bleed into your life's work. I could see how, you know, even if you are a quote unquote talented musician, I can see how you would think that it's okay to do that.
I think most people interested in music or involved in the music industry know that a ton of small artists pay for plays on SoundCloud or streams on Spotify. It's pretty common and similar to how people buy views for their YouTube or bought their viewers on Twitch. I could just Google right now, buy streams for SoundCloud, and probably find a ton of websites willing to do this for me for relatively cheap. I'll touch more on why people do this later, but one obvious reason is to make people think that they're poppin', which incites others to check them out. But I'm not so interested in small artists doing that because we already know that. What fascinates me is seeing big artists like French Montana faking their streams. In a suspiciously now deleted Vice documentary on fake streams, a Vice documentary maker named Michael K. Williams was able to interview a music industry insider named Chad Focus, who exposed the world of fake streams. He made the claim that all of the huge artists signed to labels, whether or not they know it, are benefiting from fake streams.
These artists are on these streaming phones, they are on these streaming platforms. Even from a guy like a J. Cole that say how many artists get streams from these bots, they not as high as they seem. Well, J. Cole is a part of that system as well, and he don't even...
Whoa! Okay, so when you guys hear this, do you guys believe it? Do you guys think he's capping, or do you think he's telling the truth? Because the thing that I think you guys have to understand here is that there is an actual incentive to bot your artists, to bot your streams. There's an incentive to it. It's not that these people are just inherently evil. It's that there's a reason why you don't search up A Tribe Called Quest every day, like every single day. There's a reason you don't do that, right? And a part of the reason is the amount of distractions you have to get through in order for you to actually want to look up A Tribe Called Quest. And what that means is just that, like, if A Tribe Called Quest wants to drop a new album, it's going to take work, time, and, you know, money. So by the time it drops, how many more things have you been told to go check out and then be immersed in and take up your time? Like, a new TV show can drop, and that's like hours of your week gone. A new movie drops, and you're waiting for the trailer, and all, you're watching the podcast review and stuff like that. So the amount of things that they have to do outside of going in the studio, recording an album, and releasing it will take up so much more of the quote-unquote algorithm that it would actually incentivize them to automate it, to just make it easier for them to have to do that so they can actually focus on music. And there was a time where that was a job for people. Like, that would be a group of humans. They would be called your street team. They would go out to venues, clubs, and kind of make the whole city kind of like a vibe to where your music kind of drove the vibe. Like, if it was party music like Lil Jon, it wouldn't be Lil Jon going everywhere. It'd be fans of Lil Jon just going around playing Lil Jon music, doing what they like to do, and it just seemed cool to be a Lil Jon fan. But because there's no actual incentive to do that, like to be a fan anymore, because like I said, the utility cost of being a fan is higher and higher, to go to these shows, to buy the merch, and to actually follow the artist around. A lot of you are fans on Twitter, you're a fan on Instagram, or you're a fan on your own personal little Spotify playlist, and you think you're supporting. So for Lil Jon, in my example, to thrive and to actually make an algorithmic mark, he's got to basically put a little robot virus in all of these phones and these networks and these emails and these social media accounts to get you to check it out. And to drive it all home, did you find it weird how, like, when a new artist comes out, there's a bunch of quote unquote fan accounts that just post their pictures and talk about what they do all day? Those are people running a bunch of bot accounts and bot comments and regurgitating content. And when you see like female rappers just taking photo shoots and things like that, that has nothing to do with music. So all of that stuff is just for them to be able to market themselves. And there is a huge incentive to do it, because if they don't, then you will look at the person who is botting.
No, The major labels are running these streaming phones, they're running these streaming numbers, they're running these setups.
So this is obviously a very bold claim, but is it really that far-fetched? Like I said earlier, we saw tweets with pictures showing off tons of big name artists that are signed to Atlantic Records with fake comments and likely fake views on their music videos as well. And Atlantic Records is under Warner Music Group, another one of the big 3 record labels. So far, we have seen artists under...
Now, before we go forward, this video is a little bit older, but Warner and many other major record labels are generally okay with AI created music as well. So again, like I pointed out with French Montana, they have the characteristics of a company that would be okay with botting, in my opinion.
2 of the 3 big record labels manipulating their streams. Interestingly enough, one of the people on Twitter who pointed out Don Toliver's comments, Bryce Fitz, and the guy who wrote the French Montana thread were both suspended on Twitter following their tweets, although Bryce did get his Twitter back. Another person that got caught up in a fake stream scandal was G-Eazy. In 2021, Rolling Stone posted an article called Inside the Black Market Where Artists Can Pay for Millions of Streams. The general director of the International Confederation of Music Publishers admitted in the article that there is a black market for pay-for-play. So in the expose, Rolling Stone mentioned that 2 CEOs of a management group called the Blueprint Group got into contact with someone named Joshua Mack. The Blueprint Group manages artists like G-Eazy, Lil Nas X, Trippie Redd, and plenty more. Rolling Stone was able to get the audio from the phone call, and one of G-Eazy's people said, "I want this to be big." Joshua Mack claimed that they can generate 200 million streams a month.
I have a super basic question.
200 million streams is not a lot of money per se, but it does look crazy in terms of like getting 200 million people to play. Like if you want to, juxtapose it to like what you're actually going to get and things like that, it's not a whole lot, but it is something to try to figure out, like, what does it really mean in terms of like the incentive to get that much money? Like why are you trying to do this? Like what's the play, my guy? Why are you acting all, weird about it?
I have a super basic question. When you say you're going to do Spotify and do Apple, like, what exactly does that mean? What are you doing?
One, we're saving the album and running the numbers up. That's the first thing. Across multiple devices, all premium. Okay. 2, we're driving.
Okay, hold on. So he's basically gonna run, I guess, streams through multiple devices on the accounts attached to these devices. So the streaming software sites have a bunch of accounts that they're seeing running these streams, and they're not doing anything about it. That's one thing, because they have to pay out for these streams, so they have to pay attention to that. The other thing is that he also said all premium, which means for you guys who use Spotify free, you don't count, because you're paying us through ad revenue. You're not paying us through anything else, right? So they're paying monthly for subscriptions for robots to stream whatever music they want to stream to get their album numbers up. And it's usually probably driven so that they can reach their salaries in their record label, but it also makes the album look good if you are attached to that project as an employee.
Wait, hold on. I have more questions about that. So, like, how is that happening?
We basically, crack the code and understand how to manipulate the system and hit astronomical numbers.
So what he's describing here sounds like stream
He tried not to say anything.
farms, but again, I'm going to touch on that more a little bit later. But Joshua Mack said in the phone call that he works with tons of major labels and big artists. He said, if we stop pressing the buttons, the people at the labels would not be able to be getting the type of response and support they're getting.
Okay, that was my point about there being an incentive. If they stop doing the botting, the record labels won't get the support that they have been getting. So when you think about, let's say, like the 90s when they had the huge music video budgets back then, today when you see 7 dudes stand in front of one car with one model, one girl, it's because they can't afford to make a music video. There's no real production value there. They probably spend all the money trying to get bots and AI engines and the record label to actually sustain itself in the market, right? So what artists are having to deal with is, well, how do I get this to make sense for me financially? And then for most of them, because they're the quote unquote hustlers of their culture, they think it's okay to just bot. They're rolling with it.
In the expose, Rolling Stone even interviewed an anonymous A&R from a prominent label who said, there are a few third-party companies out there running this for a lot of the major companies. We use them too for some of our artists. We agree to a certain amount of money for a certain amount of streams, and we can spread that out among our artists. It's like, we're good, we just need performance-enhancing steroids to be a little bit better. G-Eazy is also signed to Sony, but I also want to clarify that it is possible that not all of these major labels know what's going on. They very well could be, but I'm not going to make any accusations, because I don't want a lawsuit. Actually, one indie label manager saw one of his artist songs have a huge jump in streams and investigated it just to find out the new jump in streams was fake. So after looking at all of these examples and bringing up all the statistics, it seems pretty common. It's actually so common that one person who I talked to about a video I made nonchalantly told me their label wanted to buy some true views for my video. Now, I don't even know what true views are, but obviously I declined because, you know, I'm a man of integrity, and it's also just really shady and weird. But I was also fascinated at how casually it was brought up, as if it's just another day in the music industry. So this is obviously a big deal, and it's much larger than what most of us probably thought it was. So if that's the case, then why has it gone undetected for so long? Well, as it turns out, fake streams are nothing new and have existed for a very long time in many different ways. Before streaming services even existed, the music industry wasn't really that good at keeping track of album sales. In the early days of the music industry, Billboard charts were based on the rankings of the albums sold in stores. So if one album in particular was sold the most, that is how they would get their data. I don't fully understand how this worked, but it seemed really messy. Music measurement, as we know now, started in the United States in 1991, when record stores started sending reports to a company called SoundScan. But even then, tracking album sales was not easy. For example, in 2006, a rumor was being spread that Michael Jackson had sold over 750 million albums in his life. This is because one of his publicists was telling fan clubs that MJ had exceeded over 250 million units, which people assumed meant albums, when in reality it probably meant singles. For the longest time, there wasn't a great way to verify album sales. Michael Jackson actually holds the Guinness World Record for most albums sold, but Guinness World Records themselves say sales figures vary wildly from source to source. They don't even know how many units he actually sold, which obviously he still holds that title because he just sold a crazy amount, but the fact they don't even know the exact number is astounding. And while this lack of data isn't confirmation that people manipulated it intentionally, I'm sure there were some people and maybe even labels inflating their numbers. Of course, there was also Radio Payola, which is still a thing despite it being illegal now. If you aren't aware, it's basically just when labels pay radio stations to play their artist's song. It's a pretty simple idea and a very common thing. But what about the streaming age? What kind of methods are people using now to fake their streams? Well, that's where stream manipulation comes in.
Question.
We're all familiar with the J. Cole line where he says, how many faking they streams, getting they plays from machines? I can see behind the smoke and mirrors people aren't really big as they seem.
It's almost prophetic how that tends to happen, right? Rappers self-snitching and stuff like that. But I do want to explore a bit of that conversation about like how the record labels seem to like pay for the streams and things like that themselves. Like I said, it's an incentive for them to do that, but again, when you think about how you guys consume music today, it really makes no sense on trying to get you guys to get up out your house and come to a show if you're not willing to pay for the money, right? Pay with the money. So this is what I try to do when I think about artists that I want to support. Like if I listen to somebody on Spotify or something like that, and I'm like, wow, I just like the music, I'll dive into the actual profile that they have and see if they're actually working hard, I guess, or consistent in my eyes. And then if I like the music, I try to figure out why I like the music, and then that'll determine if I support it. What most listeners are doing is that they are actually just listening to something because it's new or because it's old. That's literally it. It's something your parents told you to listen to or have shown you, and you just haven't given it up, and you're just like, oh, that's my jam. You just repeat that. Or you're listening to it because it's just the new thing the kids are listening to. So with the level of intention I think you would have to have, that's going to be the difference between being able to support an artist and not supporting an artist. The other side of this is for record labels to actually see value in that, because right now they only see value in right now is just botting
Ironically enough, this was on 21 Savage's song A Lot, and 21 is an artist who has also been accused of stream manipulation. Post Malone and 21 Savage's song Rockstar was involved in a stream manipulation controversy because Republic Records posted a version of the song on YouTube that was just the chorus on loop. Many people accuse them of attempting to trick fans into thinking it's the real song, and every view on this video aids towards its spot on the charts. And this video had a whopping 41 million views before it was deleted. Of course, the song was very successful, and I'm not blaming 21 Savage or Post Malone, but the YouTube loophole very well could have aided that song in going #1 on the Billboard charts.
And so another thing too is you guys as fans, as audience members, you don't get this news reported to you unless you look to it, right? This is reported on Chartbeat in 2017. And so if you're not like involved in the industry or like immersed in this kind of stuff, you probably just like the song Rockstar. You weren't really caring about this kind of stuff.
Another example is when the streaming service Tidal came under fire in 2018 for manipulating the streams on their platform as well. While the methods aren't exactly known, they claim that Kanye's The Life of Pablo was streamed 250 million times in 10 days, and that Beyonce's Lemonade was streamed 306 million times in 15 days. Those are crazy numbers, especially for a smaller streaming service like Tidal. But it's even more crazy when you realize that they were boasting their 3 million users. This would mean that every subscriber would have had to listen to Kanye's album 8 times a day on average. Obviously this seems fake, and if it wasn't obvious enough, the Norwegian University of Science and Technology investigated Tidal and found that the streams were indeed manipulated. They also found that Tidal lied about how many subscribers they had, as it was actually closer to 1 million. But perhaps the biggest and most common form of stream manipulation is album bundles. So album bundles are when an artist sells something, typically merch, and throws in an album to help boost sales, which gives them a higher spot on the Billboard charts. Pretty much every major artist has done this, but some have done it in a weird and seemingly unfair way. Like when DJ Khaled was selling energy drinks bundled with his album Father of Assad, which was actually...
I've talked about this a bunch of times with people and they don't believe me, but like when I used to tell people that like a concert ticket should be like super cheap because you bought all the damn merch that comes with the damn concert, they didn't understand it because I guess, I don't know, I guess we're just cool with just paying for 19 different things to see one thing. But yeah, when I noticed that they were counting this as album sales, that was why I was bringing it up. It was like, why would you count this as like album or ticket sales and things like that? But like I said, it's if you're the type of person, pay attention to who's in this picture. If you're the type of person to sell someone else's creation, which is completely legal, like you can do that. It's called exploitation. If you're the type of person to do this, you would not see a problem with this.
Actually disqualified by Billboard, which prompted DJ Khaled to sue them. It looks like Billboard did not believe in our favorite DJ. I'm not going to touch too much on this since it's so common and it really isn't the worst form of stream manipulation. Also, Billboard got rid of merch bundles and then reintroduced it in a much more limited fashion, so it seems like they're getting a bit more strict with their charting requirements. Labels have also been accused of buying their own artists' albums to boost the sales, but that one's pretty self-explanatory. However, stream manipulation is one of the more publicly known methods. Most people are familiar with it, but there are many more discreet ways in which people fake their streams. A professor from the University of Texas wrote a paper called Fake Streams, Listening Bots, and Click Farms, which detailed some of these methods. One of the most known and obvious methods are bots. Like I said earlier, you can literally just Google buy Spotify streams and you will likely be met with a bunch of bot services. The indie label manager I mentioned earlier thinks that people are even hacking into legitimate accounts and streaming from those accounts when they're not streaming music, which sounds a lot like the French Montana situation. One guy on Reddit even posted that a label he signed with was using bots to boost his streams. This is a pretty known issue, and streaming services like Spotify do their best to crack down on it. And while it's pretty much impossible to entirely get rid of the issue just because there's so many fake streams, Spotify and other services do their best to get rid of it. However,
so now that we've considered all of the information we've had so far, what do you guys think is going to happen when they start implementing AI artists that are on AI record labels? Do you think they're going to be super fair and be like, yeah, the artist is working hard in the studio, the next album is delayed? Like, how do y'all think this is going to look? And how do you think this is going to affect the Pro-Rata pool? And also, how do you think this is going to affect the subscription cost for you guys to get access to music when there's so much more music to filter through to pay for these resources and things like that? How do you think this is going to work? So all in all, I think this is going to be a conversation that's going to continue in probably the coming years, really. But this was a pretty in-depth or in-depth conversation about how to really navigate consumer culture within the music industry. But this was Musician Talks with DameSmiff. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. I will see you guys in the next one. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe so you can catch all my latest videos. But I'm out.